Welcome to another episode of Sustainable Living with Janine Liza. In this series, I share ways that I find to live a little bit healthier and more of a sustainable life here at home. In this episode, I am harvesting and preserving the celery from the garden. Once they've been washed and the roots have been removed, I start looking for anything that might be wrong with them and take out the parts that would not be edible. Inside the stem there, you can see that some of it is discolored and gone rotten, so I'm just removing those parts and any leaves that are a bit past date. This thinner stem is all, well, mostly yellow, and if you look inside you can see it's gone rotten there, so I'll just save what I can from it, just a few leaves. The weather was still nice, so I decided to do this outdoors, chopping off the excess of the plant that wasn't needed, getting rid of the bits that can go back into the soil and just be nutrients for next year. It's just a lot easier than bringing it all into the house and possibly having little bugs fall off in the kitchen and doing it that way. And I could use the garden hose as well because it's not frozen yet, so it worked out perfectly. I'm happy to see that there's quite a large amount of the celery that is still good, and I haven't left it too late in the season to harvest. Now I'm going to give them a very good cleaning and try to get any of the last bits off of them that I don't need to be bringing into the house. While rinsing them, I find this little slug. There's one or two of those on there. Just clean those off and make sure that there's nothing else on there that I don't really want to bring inside. First rinse is done, and now it's going to be time for a second rinse. Just want to make sure they're really clean. Okay, I think that's sufficient, and you can get rid of this and just put it into the plant beds. It's time to bring these inside to separate the stems and the leaves and prepare them for dehydration. After chopping up the celery, I'm giving it another rinse. I have the 3-inch pieces of the stem and the little bunches of leaves, which I'm placing separately on dehydration trays. Some of the celery pieces being shorter won't matter, but if the celery stems are thicker, I've sliced them vertically in order to make the pieces of celery roughly around the same size so that they dehydrate at the same rate. I'm packing the leaves on quite thick to the tray because you can actually put quite a lot on there. So if you imagine like just sort of 4 levels stacked up of leaves there, once they dry out it will become practically flat, so it's okay to stack them on there. I organised the stems to fit as many as I could, but tried not to double layer them. Time to stack the celery and the leaf trays on the dehydrator and tuck in any loose bits at the edges. I'm going to turn the dial on the dehydrator to one of the higher levels, and then as the days go on I turn it down to a lower and lower level, and sometimes I'll turn the machine off for a few hours to give it a bit of a break. These are ready when they're crisp and they crumble and could become powder when blended. The celery stems were put into the little blender, this little one, and then ground until they became the powder. So this is celery salt. If I mix it with a salt, it'll become a celery salt, but this is now fine enough to do that with. For the leaves, I'm going to separate those by putting them, well, first of all I got to put them into a tray and crush them a little bit. So I'm going to just use my hands to crush them gently. If I do it too quickly, little pieces will fly out. And I'm also doing it gently because I don't want to break all the stems up into the leaves. I just want to get the most delicate parts of the leaves crushed. And then I want to leave the stems separate so that I could grind those up into the celery salt jar as well. And I'll show you how we're going to separate them. I just need to make sure the leaves get small enough first. Rolling like this on my hands allows the sticks to stay whole, but the leaves become smaller, ground into smaller pieces. So I'm not crushing and snapping the twigs and stems. Okay, now I'll show you how we separate it. I happen to have a steamer pan here that has just the right size holes to let small herbs travel through. And I'm going to get a bowl to transfer them to. Make sure it's dry in the bottom. Everything has to be very, very dry in order for this to work. Otherwise I'll have to try dehydrating it again. I don't want to have to go through that process again, so if it's not necessary. So now I just use it like a sifter and sift the beautiful leaves, little pieces that have been crushed. So they're all similar in size now. Perfect for cooking. And you can see the larger pieces of leaf are still in here, and so are the stems. So now I'm going to crush those up a little bit more. And I can do that right in this pot. Right, and then I'll put that in the little mixer. Okay, and then I look down in here and I do see a few stems went through. So I'm just going to grab the ones that are very obvious and bring those out. Anything smaller will probably soften when cooked, but any of the thicker stems that made their way through, I'm going to take those out. Not wanting to waste anything, I've taken all the extra bits of celery stalk, ground them up, and this is being added to the jar of the celery powder from all of the celery plants from the garden this fall. now it's all in the jar. I'm putting the lid on, and there is a food grade silica pack in there as well. You just can't see it because it's been completely covered in all the powder. Here's the jar that I put the previous batch of celery leaves in. Dried celery with a silica, food safe silica pack. So now we slowly put this into here. You don't want to lose any of it because a tiny bit could be quite a few leaves. And it's shrunken down into, well, this batch, the previous batch was 2. This is 5. So we have 7 large celery plants grown fresh from the garden, all dehydrated down into these 2 jars. And we haven't even filled the jars. There we go. So 7 large celery plants. Because this is a leafy type herb now and a salt, it's going to last a very long time. Those 7 plants, organically grown, fresh from the garden, and now I can use these instead of store-bought. You might wonder, how can you grow so many different things in order to have variety in your pantry? Well, with this much stored of the celery, I won't need to grow celery next year, so I can rotate with something different. Thank you for viewing, and I hope sharing this process has been helpful to you. If you'd like to help support my channel, please feel free to click the subscribe button. To find more videos like this one, you can go to the Sustainable Living at Home with Janine Liza playlist on Art with Janine Liza YouTube.